We spend a staggering amount of our lives waiting for the future to render a verdict, a medical test result, an email about a promotion, a text message to see if someone is angry with us. We obsess over these moments, trying to guarantee an outcome that hasn't happened yet. This strategy contains a severe mathematical flaw. When you hinge your daily sense of stability on variables you don't control, your well-being becomes an outcome of luck. You effectively outsource your mental state to chance. If the news is good, you get a temporary high. But when the outcomes go against you, the resulting defeat is paralyzing. The anxiety loop simply resets and waits for the next external verdict. Over 2 millennia ago, philosophers like the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius identified this exact psychological trap. Modern pop culture often paints these thinkers as unfeeling statues, leading to the stereotype of the Stoic, who bottles up emotions and endures suffering in silence. That is a complete misreading of their project. Another thinker from that era, a formerly enslaved philosopher named Epictetus, proposed a radical alternative. He developed a strict mental sorting mechanism that we now call the dichotomy of control. True emotional stability arrives when you completely change how you categorize your reality, rather than attempting to force the world to comply with your wishes. The core function of this dichotomy is brutally simple. Epictetus instructed his students to draw a hard line through their lives, dividing the world into 2 distinct spheres of existence. Visualizing this mechanism, on one side are outputs, external circumstances outside our absolute control, like wealth, health, reputation, and others' actions. On the other side are inputs, firmly inside our control. This sphere contains our character, judgments, intentions, and deliberate actions. The most critical distinction here is recognizing the difference between attempting to influence an event and believing you can guarantee its outcome. Say you have a major presentation at work. You have total authority over how rigorously you prepare your data, how honestly you frame your arguments, and how much you practice your delivery. But once you step off that stage, your agency ends. You have zero control over whether the audience actually likes the presentation or whether your boss agrees with your conclusions. When you apply this input-output filter to your daily life, your psychological baseline shifts. You stop agonizing over the unknown variables of the future and start relying entirely on your own internal efforts. This ancient philosophical concept maps precisely onto the foundation of modern empirical science, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy. Think about the life cycle of psychological distress. An external trigger occurs, say a sudden flight cancellation. Immediately, your brain makes an automated, subconscious judgment, deciding that this is a catastrophe and you should panic. In a clinical flowchart, this dichotomy acts as an interception point. It steps between an external trigger and your automated response, interrupting the judgment before it spirals into panic. It intercepts the flawed expectation, like demanding the weather cooperate, rather than suppressing the feeling itself. The moment you accept the reality of an uncontrollable event, the wasteful drain of panic stops. This cognitive filter takes all that remaining mental energy and redirects it to the only sphere where we possess power, deciding how you are going to respond to the situation in front of you. There is a valid critique of modern resilience culture. Sometimes emphasizing individual endurance is used to obscure the structural causes of suffering, placing the burden entirely on the individual to adapt to a broken system. The dichotomy of control demands active judgment. Software engineer Susan Fowler applied Stoic logic by systematically documenting and confronting structural sexism at her workplace. Her story proves that internal discipline can fuel external resistance. In the Stoic framework, justice and social responsibility are core active virtues. They require deliberate engagement with the world, not withdrawal from it. Authentic Stoic acceptance is a recognition of baseline reality, providing a prerequisite for fighting back effectively, rather than a form of approval. You acknowledge the event so you can respond without being blinded by denial or rage. Stoic training leads toward eudaimonia, a Greek term that translates to true human flourishing. This state represents a life defined by the excellence of one's own character. Eudaimonia is achieved when a person grounds their moral identity entirely in their own deliberate actions. Consider Vice Admiral James Stockdale, who relied on these exact teachings to maintain his psychological freedom and ethical integrity during years of brutal captivity as a prisoner of war. Even in extreme conditions where his external agency was stripped away, his inner character remained unshakable. Wisdom and ethics provide the only reliable path to a good life, in a world where uncertainty is the only guarantee. Sustained practice makes it possible to live with purpose, regardless of the circumstances fortune provides.